Hi, this is basically everything I learned in AP World History Modern, Unit 2. Unit 2.1. The Silk Roads were a series of trade routes that connected China with the Byzantine Empire, having several states in between them. Luxury items were traded along the Silk Roads. Luxury items were expensive and in high demand and were not needed to survive. For example, silk, spices, jewelry, and incense were all traded along the Silk Road. A wide variety of ethnicities worked as merchants along the Silk Roads, such as the Chinese, Persians, and Jews. Trade cities had emerged across trade routes such as the Silk Roads. They grow to the volume of trade. Two examples from the Silk Roads were Kashgar and Samarkand. The main religions in these trade cities were Islam and Buddhism. Caravanserai were inns where people and their animals could rest. They were protected by walls, encouraging more people to travel as it was safer. Certain commercial technologies and innovations made trading easier. This encouraged more people to trade. A bill of exchange was a paper that you could present to merchants to tell them that you were good for the money, but you just didn't have it on you. This is like a credit card. Banking houses, which inspired banks, were places where you could take out loans, deposit and withdraw money for safekeeping, and you could also exchange currencies. Paper money, which was first used in southern China, was lightweight, more wieldy, and less visible, so thieves had harder times going directly for it. As demand for luxury items increased along the Silk Roads, artisans had produced more for exports. The Chinese main exports were porcelain and silk. The Persian main export was tapestries. The Indian main export were pepper and cotton textiles. Unit 2.2. The Mongol Government. The Mongols were divided into tribes that were each culturally similar to each other. Mongols were each expected to learn and become proficient in archery and horseback riding. After the current leader of a tribe died, they would be replaced by the best leader instead of their next of kin. Genghis Khan unified all the tribes into one confederation so they could grow stronger. As they started to conquer others, they became classified as an empire. The Mongols usually established a tributary relationship with the peoples they had conquered. After Genghis Khan died, the empire was divided into 4 khanates. At first, the Mongols were ruthless while they were conquering, but after a period of peace and flourishing trade proceeded. Khanates take the form of the government of the lands they conquered so less people resist. Kublai Khan and the Yuan Dynasty. Kublai Khan was Mongol to finish taking over China, founding the Yuan Dynasty. The dynasty copied the Chinese political structure but rejected their culture. Foreigners became bureaucrats because they didn't trust the Chinese. The dynasty rejected Confucian ideals because they were using animism, but they did not care if the citizens decided to practice Confucianism anyways. Under the dynasty, agriculture declined because the Mongols did not know or care about how to protect from floods, as they were nomadic at first. Inflation also occurred because they had printed too much paper money, and also the plague started during the Yuan Dynasty. The Chinese citizens did not like the Mongol rule, so a group formed the White Lotus Society. The White Lotus was a secret organization formed to put an end to the Yuan Dynasty's rule. The dynasty was eventually ended by Zhu Yuanzhang, a Buddhist monk who led a revolt that overthrew the Yuan Dynasty and then founded the Ming Dynasty. The Ilkhanate. The Ilkhanate was a khanate that had conquered Persia. They had captured the Persian Shah and publicly executed them. The Ilkhanate adopted Persian culture and actually had Persians in their bureaucracy, even if the Mongols could be the only leaders. Paper money inflation also happened here, as well as agriculture decline, but here it happened because they destroyed the underground canals the Persians had. Factions formed because after the first person died, they did not know who would take over. Batu and the Golden Horde. Batu had founded the Golden Horde and took over Russia. they had formed a tributary relationship with them because they didn't want to live in those woods. The leader of the Kievan Rus, Ivan the Great, took extra gold from the tributes to raise an army against the Mongols. They won. PaxMongolica. After the Mongols had finished conquering a place, a period of peace and flourishing trade occurred called the PaxMongolica. The Mongols had developed a new horse message system called the Yam, where you go to an inn, drop off your old horse, let it rest, and take a new horse. This was more efficient. The Mongols resettled people such as artisans when they made new cities or conquered new places. These people brought their culture and items to these cities, spreading them. Such things that were spread were Islamic knowledge, printing paper and gunpowder from China, engineering advances, art styles, and the Uyghur alphabet, which was the Mongol alphabet. Units 2.3 and 2.4. The regions that were directly connected to and participated in the Indian Ocean Basin trade were South and Southeast Asia, East Africa, the Middle East, and although they weren't directly connected to it, China and Europeans sometimes also participated. Monsoon winds were seasonal, and merchants that had knowledge about them were able to trade more efficiently and safer. While waiting for these monsoons, merchants traded and interacted with others and also married women. This spread Islam because their children practiced Islam then. Naval technologies had gotten improvements and new innovations in order to help sailors. The compass had become smaller and more portable, so it was less likely to get lost. The astrolabe, which shows your latitude, was improved upon by the Arabs. Larger ships designs had also been created, and it was stabler, so it was safer, and it could also hold more cargo. The Arabs/Persians made dhows, and the Chinese made junks. In history, growth in cities means that there's more people there, while growth in states means that the government owns more land. The more trade there is, the more growth there is. In cities, the more trade there is, the more people go there to trade, increasing the population. For example, Calicut had a lot of pepper, so a lot of people went there to go trade. The government also taxed trade, improving the economy, and also they had a customs fee, which was an import/export fee. Malacca, which was in Southeast Asia, modern Malaysia, was a Muslim city that had charged ships that passed through the strait. A diaspora community was a settlement of any peoples, not just Jewish people, that were living away from their homeland. Merchants may have stayed as diaspora communities because it was a good trade opportunity, monsoons hadn't come yet, or because they had married others. Shanghi. Shanghi was a Turkish Muslim sent by the Chinese government as a display of Chinese might. They had made it all the way to Africa and had facilitated a lot of diffusion this way. His voyages were cancelled by the Emperor Zhu Gaozhai, the next Ming Emperor, who then used the voyage money to finish the Great Wall of China to protect from Mongols. The trans-Saharan trade routes connected states north and south of the Saharan Desert. New commercial practices and transportation technologies increased the volume of trade occurring. For example, camels had certain features which made traveling across the desert easier, and caravanserai were making the trade routes safer to stay at. People north of the Sahara traveled to trade, while southerners stayed. The people that traveled were the Arabs and Berbers. Units 2.5 and 2.6. Cultural consequences. Consequences aren't just negative in world history. They may also be positive effects. Diffusion was the spread of culture and ideas, like how Islam diffused via trade, and how Muslims learned how to make paper during a war by capturing Chinese papermakers. Travelers such as Zhang He also helped to facilitate the diffusion. A city is just an area where lots of people live. They grew to new technologies being invented and more trade occurring in those areas. They declined to invasion and wars, specifically Mongols in this time period, the plague, and also economic and population decline. During this time period, more people traveled because new technologies that have been invented helped make traveling easier and safer. Also, the books of certain famous explorers helped to inspire more people to try and do it themselves. Marco Polo. Marco Polo was from a merchant family in Venice. They went directly to Yuan, China in order to get trade materials for cheaper prices. They met with Kublai Khan, who ordered Marco to stay because he liked his stories. When they were finally able to go back to Italy, they got imprisoned by one of their war enemies. One of Marco's cellmates heard and published his stories in a book. A lot of people read that book, inspiring them to travel. It was called The Travels of Marco Polo. Ibn Battuta. Ibn Battuta was an Arab Muslim Qadi, which was a judge of Islamic law. They were from Morocco, but took the Hajj. However, they decided to continue traveling past Mecca. They went to Southeast Asia, the Delhi Sultanate, China, and Mali. They do not approve of Mali because the women there were dressed immodestly, and they also had friend guys. They also had a book written about their adventures, which gave information to modern-day historians and also inspired others to trade. Marjorie Camp. Marjorie Camp was a devout Christian from England. They took the pilgrimage to the Holy Land and also to Spain on the Santiago/St. James Trail. Their priest friend wrote down her adventures, which inspired others to travel also. Environmental consequences. The environmental consequences are just a diffusion of crops and pathogens. Crops. The three crops that diffused were bananas from Africa to Southeast Asia, rice varieties aka champa rice, which was from Vietnam to China when the Tang Dynasty ruled them, and citrus from Southeast Asia to India to the Abbasid Caliphate. Pathogens. A pathogen is just a thing that causes disease. For example, the plague. The plague started in China and was spread by trade and the Mongols whom they kept conquering places. An epidemic is what the plague was. It is a large disease that was never seen before. An endemic is what the plague became. It has been there for a long time and has started to become not so bad. For example, influenza.